tapered wheel bearings. You have roller bearings. We also have ball bearings. Now these things have to carry an immense amount of weight, both axial and radial, up and down, side to side. You better have a fluid that's up for the challenge. Welcome to this AMSOIL Tech Tip. We're talking about bearings, specifically axle bearings. Well, what does that mean? That means in your axle somewhere you're going to have some bearings. I'll show you on the table here, but this one actually has a bearing here on the outside. This is an axle bearing out here. It supports the axle out here, but a lot of times they leak. So the fluid not only has to lubricate all of this, it has to go out here and lubricate those bearings as well. Now that could be a pretty tedious job if you have to change them, so you want to try to avoid that in the first place. To do that, well, you have to go inside the differential. And to go inside the differential, you have to remove the cover. Once you do that, depending on your axle design, you may have to pull a C-clips out, or Ford, sometimes you just slam them from the outside. You don't have to go in there. But this one, you have to go inside of there and actually remove this little C-clip. That's the only thing holding your axle in. Then you can go ahead and pull the axle completely out. I told you it's a pretty big job. You have to have some specialty tools. Once you have that out, you can go ahead and put the driver in there. Once you put the slide hammer in there with a couple of good blows, you should be able to knock that bearing out. Now, once you knock it out, just check your differential, make sure it's in good shape, and then you'll use a driver and you go ahead and put it back in there and make sure that it's already seated. Once you do that, you can replace the seal. Like I said, that's a pretty big job. This axle here has bearings here on the inside and the outside. Len, to do all that work, I'd like to avoid it in the first place. How can we do that?
Well, you can use a decent gear lube to start with. Something that we do at AMSOIL very well is our gear lubes. We've got different viscosities for any of the different vehicles. As these vehicles continue to search for fuel mileage, we're finding that the gear lubes are getting lighter in viscosity, and that makes the job that much more difficult because the fluid is inherently thinner. Thin is not necessarily great when we're dealing with all of the pressure and heat that's developed by a differential. So you have to make sure that you're building it properly. So good film strength, good base oils, proper amount of additive to make sure that it's resisting oxidation.
Yeah, you're doing the axle bearings, depending on the axle itself, and all the way on the outside, so it has to move as well.
Right, it's got to move in all temperatures, right? It has to be thin enough to move in the cold, but thick enough to protect in the heat. So it's kind of, you need the best of both worlds. You have to understand the application and then formulate properly.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Axle seals going bad, well, that could be a huge hassle. We're talking about a damaged differential, brake shoes, pads are all ruined. Why not keep them protected with the best differential fluids and so many other awesome products? Just go to AMSOIL.com.